Hello guys, hello everyone. Welcome to another enlightening session of NextGen 24. I'm Arpita, product designer at Flightbase, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this session. How are you finding the session so far? Please let us know in the chat. It'll definitely help us curate the sessions better in the upcoming edition. So the wonderful audience, please tell us where you guys are joining us from. We would really like to know what parts of the world we are reaching out to. Okay, we got somebody from Southern California, France, Barcelona. That's great. China. Okay, so we got quite the diverse audience. That's exactly what we were looking for. Okay, so coming to this session's topic, are you guys excited to dive deep into automated Powerline inspections with IDI and Nexus Dock? I bet you are. So let's welcome our speakers from IDI and Geo Aerospace. Is my audio audible to everybody?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's great. So we might have to wait for our next speaker to turn up, but until then, let's talk about our first speaker. So our first speaker is the CEO and founder of IDIPLOYER with an experience of over 5 years in the UAV industry. He started off as a remote drone pilot, quickly moving up the ladder to build a large client portfolio by performing aerial surveys and inspection across the construction and telecom industry. It was this experience that led him to pivot towards establishing a business in drone automation. Give a warm welcome to Peter Campbell from IDI.
Thank you so much for the introduction and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. Really kind introduction there. And as our Peter said, we've kind of been in the drone industry for 5 years, well, 6 years now. 3 of which have been in the drone automation industry, and that journey has always been with Flightbase integrating into our systems. We've deployed globally from security inspection all the way to surveys, and we are constantly advancing our technology, and we can't do that without the correct software and the partnerships and the collaboration from the industry. So it's the events like NextGen which really bring this all together and enable us as the manufacturers and the hardware providers to provide solutions to industry problems.
Right. Yes, perfectly explained. I'd like to introduce our second guest as well. Yes, he's right there on time. So I was just about to introduce you, Fergus.
Thank you all, and apologies I'm late. I had a
That's
3-hour
all right.
delay getting here. But yes, my name's Fergus Foyle, and I'm CEO of Geo Aerospace.
Yes.
We're an Irish-based geospatial data technology company, just based outside Dublin in Ireland. And our kind of primary focus is on critical infrastructure. So we're involved in road, rail, power line, wind farm, solar farm, those type of projects, which obviously lend themselves really well to drone technology. So over the past number of years, we've been working with Peter in IDIPLOYER and yourselves in Flightbase, developing solutions from an operational point of view, how we actually integrate these docks in our end use application, which is Powerline specifically.
Right, yes. Thank you for that, Fergus. So before I let Fergus and Peter take over, I'd like to share some ground housekeeping rules. So please type your questions in the Q&A tab of the session and it will be answered at the end of the presentation. The session is getting recorded and will be published soon. We also have IDEA and Geo Aerospace booths set up in the expo section. So please do make sure you visit it, and during the networking and booth visit slots, you can also find some of the members online there. Finally, please remember to capture your favorite moments of the session and do post it on LinkedIn and let us know how everything is for you. And last but not the least, we'd like to thank our title sponsors, DJI Enterprise, and our gold sponsor, Sunflower Labs. With that, over to you, Peter and Fergus.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll skip the intro page because we've done that on yours. So we'll dive straight in. And first of all, I just want to kind of give you a picture of what we're doing as IDIPLOYER and the drone in a box systems. We're soon to be moving over to some new branding, which is IDI Dock. So the Nexus branding, the Nexus Plus, all of these sort of wordings that you see and familiar with our systems are moving to IDI Dock. So watch out for that brand changeover, but we're still a great team and still great partnerships that we have across the globe. Now what we're focused on is delivering fully autonomous solutions that are scalable through the cloud solutions that we have with Flightbase and some of our data processing partners and Geo Aerospace. And then the reliability of our systems. I think a lot of the focus on the NextGen event is about now people are doing POCs or coming to the end of POCs. How do we ensure that these systems are reliable when we scale? And a really key part of the last 12 months has been about reliability of our systems from a precision landing point of view, but also from the hardware. How do we make these hardware solutions reliable for the long term? So if they're in the same place for 12, 18, 24 months, how reliable are them systems and how accessible are they and maintainable? And all of these developments we've been doing have enabled us to provide really simple systems, so very low maintenance, very low cost in terms of running. Just to give you an idea, we can get these systems running at 3.5 watts in idle mode. So we're not heavy on energy, so we can be green at the same time as deploying multiple scalable systems. And with the work we've been doing the last 12 months, making these systems as affordable as we possibly can, not only to compete with the market, but also to make sure that you can scale these systems up when your POCs come to an end. So that's kind of a really brief introduction to what we're doing. I'll hand over to Fergus.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, and I suppose I introduced us a little bit, but just a bit of background about the company. So essentially, we're a geospatial data technology company, and what that means is we collect, process, and analyze geospatial data. So we look at it from a data stack point of view. So we collect satellite data, aircraft data, UAV, terrestrial, so that full sort of data stack, and then we perform advanced data analytics, and then that data is then presented to our clients through the cloud platform we have, which has been advanced or further advanced now with the addition of dock stations, but I'll talk more about that shortly. So I suppose we have aircraft, drones, and multiple types of drones, but we're over the past couple of years, we've started to move towards full automation or building a use case around our customers' needs, which is in this case Powerline. So we have a large commercial contract for the next sort of 5 years with a utility company in Ireland and performing Powerline inspections using traditional drones. So your typical M300s, Mavic 3s with phase 1 cameras and P1 cameras and a whole host of LiDAR sensors, all the kind of usual drones and technology sensors we use that currently with pilots in the field. So that's really challenging. And the advancement of the docking station has opened up new opportunities for us. So Peter, if you just go to the next slide, I can show a little. So I suppose this specific end use case that we're looking at is to deploy docking stations strategically located across a Powerline network. What that means is we'll put docking stations. We have a proof of concept at the moment that we're running over this year, where we have multiple docking stations at a trial site. So the Powerline and substation, and we'll deploy the docking station along with automated flight plans, and we'll collect data like we do today. So this first phase is at a test site, and you can see the drone there. That's the IDIPLOYER dock with a Mavic 3 on board. So that's ongoing this year, and then hopefully next year we'll move to a larger scale project across the Irish network, and then again once that is developed, we'll move to phase 3, which is sort of European-wide deployment across Powerline networks. I guess our customer in this case is ESB, which is the kind of utility company in Ireland, the largest one, and they're really keen to see this advancement because they've obviously seen the change over time, where once it was a line walk where you had their teams out walking the line, then that moved to heli inspections, then it moved to sort of manual drone operations where the pilot's in the field controlling the drone with his sticks, or he or she, and then that's moved to automation where the pilot still goes to the field, but they collect the imagery and they inspect the assets using automated flight plans. So that's the kind of stage a lot of operators are at the moment. So they're still flying with pilots on site, but they're using automated missions to collect the data. So there's not a huge amount of human interaction other than from a regulatory point of view, having pilots there. But the next phase is obviously BV loss, which is the ongoing, but the next phase is to remove the pilots from the field. And that's what this is all about. I suppose there's a whole host of reasons why power lines are really an ideal end use for this technology. There's supportive regulations. And I mean that in the sense that across Europe, obviously, it's harmonized and standardized now. The UK is well aligned with that. And I know US and Asia and other jurisdictions are in the same state. But essentially, for power lines, you look at them from the point of view of atypical airspace. So they're low risk from an air risk point of view. They're low altitude operations, very close proximity to the asset. So they're considered, and you'll see this week, actually, the CAA in the UK published guidance on how you define atypical airspace, or public consultation, sorry, how you define atypical airspace. Traditionally, that's power lines was the typical example, but that's advanced or evolving towards any object above the ground, or long range linear corridors, rail corridors, power line corridors, road corridors, that type of environment. So there's a whole host of reasons why this is a good use case. Data quality, obviously automating your collection, so removing that person that's controlling the sticks is obviously, that's proven, and that's been done before docking stations. Obviously, now we're with docking stations. That's the advanced technology that they bring to the table. They allow us to remove the human from the field. Obviously, a huge cost saving. It's expensive at the moment, obviously, with proof of concept, because you still have to have pilots on site, so you're not fully remote at this point. And from a safety point of view, when you do get to the point where there is no longer pilots in the field, that's a huge advantage to obviously the operations team, but also the utility companies who aren't no longer worried about potential accidents that might occur in the field with humans controlling these drones. And I know, Peter, you had some comments around security and those points there, the restraining points.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a kind of a really familiar or an often asked question when we talk to clients who want to deploy and scale these solutions. Is like, we're going to have these docking stations in multiple locations, which poses a security risk from the point that people can access the systems or tamper with them. So from a hardware point of view, we've got various devices within the systems that we know when somebody's tampered with them. So we can get eyes on, or we can get some alerting to our user interface, which is your dashboard, which provides you with all your docking stations, the fleet, managing the systems, maintenance cycles, that sort of thing, but also triggering alerts if systems are faulty or if systems are in need of maintenance or being tampered with. And again, we're also developing and have developed systems or hardware that can attach the docking stations physically to a building or to the ground, and providing also external networking, so cameras, CCTV systems that you can hook into your user interface and always have visual eyes on the systems. And then BVLOS always comes up. It's a very familiar question and featured a lot during this NextGen event. Now, we are starting to see success across multiple manufacturers and docking station solution providers, but also we're now experiencing approvals where we have BVLOS approvals across Germany, some other areas in the EU, BVLOS waivers across the US, and the regulators, as Fergus said, are now starting to look at ways to regulate this lower airspace. And part of this is going to be not just what the regulators are doing, but how are we as hardware manufacturers mitigating risk? So we're developing prop inspection software. So we'll have cameras that have visuals of the battery, the propellers, the motors, and then some AI layered on top to detect if there's fracturing in motors, fractures in propellers, heat spots on propellers and motors, that sort of thing. And all of these kind of features will aid regulatory approval in the future. And again, when we focus on them two things, then scalability and the capital costs all start to align, and that's what it's about, is aligning all of the dots to make sure that we can make these systems and this technology as scalable as possible.
Super, thanks, Peter. And I suppose this is just to the audience to get an understanding of what stage, well, those of you that are carrying out Powerline operations, what sort of stage of operational operations are you at? Is it line of sight flying manually? Is it line of sight with automation, or is it BV loss with pilots on site? Or are people at the stage now where BV loss, you're deploying drones BV loss without pilots on site? I guess that's what we're talking about today. So it's just, I guess if anyone in the audience wants to kind of answer that, it'd be useful information just to hear what sort of stages people are at.
Is there any results on the poll, Peter, or?
What's that, Peter? Sorry?
Yes, the poll is live right now, so the audience can vote for their answers. And then later on, we can discuss if we would like to discuss the most voted answer or what their opinions were about the questions and whatnot.
Okay, should we come back to the poll when we get some results? And
yes, we'll come back to the end of it. So.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I suppose I alluded to this earlier. The challenge when you carry out Powerline inspections at scale, so by scale I mean nationwide, so it's really difficult to get a team of operators in the field to plan all those missions. You've multiple operators, multiple drones, they're all dispersed geographically, so there's huge kind of logistical challenges in carrying out Powerline inspections today. They're human-centric and hyper-localized. By that I mean there's one pilot operating a drone line of sight, typically, obviously moving towards BV loss, but there's still, when there's a human in that sort of field part of the equation, it is more complicated and cumbersome. There's one pilot to one drone. That's obviously not, it's inefficient, I suppose, is one way of putting it. It can be a lot more efficient, but it's about getting around the regulatory challenges to do that. It's obviously difficult, dangerous, time-consuming, and costly. Like a lot of drone operations, they've replaced that sort of human work, but it's still, you still have to put people in the field around these dangerous assets. So there's always challenges from a safety point of view to ensure that all the pilots are safe and there's nothing that could put them at risk. And obviously, live power lines is a dangerous environment. There's limited live geospatial coordination amongst the team that's in the field, people at the office, the client. There's a whole host of stakeholders that have interest in what's going on, and not having that sort of overarching geospatial information in real time limits the kind of potential to scale this. So as I mentioned, that's the kind of evolution of Powerline inspections over the last several years. And I think most operators are in that third stage, probably a lot in the fourth stage, the BV loss with automation. But the next stage really is remove that human from the field. And these are some examples. So this is what Powerline inspection to us looks like today. So the one advantage of Powerlines is generally over the last 15 to 20 years, they've been mapped and monitored or mapped with LiDAR technology. So we have all the LiDAR data for the entire network that we're inspecting, the sort of 10,000 towers, I think, roughly, or 7,500 kilometers in Ireland that need to be inspected. But the map you're seeing on or the video you're seeing at the moment is the flight plans that are generated in order to fly these missions. So the pilot goes to the location, presses takeoff, the drone performs this mission. So the white lines are the flight paths, and the red boxes you see there are the trigger points for each image. So the drone flies around the tower. So the next step is really to integrate that within the flight-based software and enable the pilot to remotely deploy these. So the challenge, I suppose, is not only, it's a geospatial challenge as well. The mission planning currently is sort of either grid missions or security patrols, but this advanced mission planning would be a really huge step forward for this type of operation, where you now enable the operator to control this remotely. The docking stations are located or co-located at the substation from a security point of view, deployed across the line. So that video on the bottom right is obviously sped up a little, but there is no human input in terms of the inspection process once we go out in the field. So it's all automated to a point. The pilot just has to be on site in the case of current operations. But that's really how it's done today. And if you just go to the next page, Peter will describe how we see the future. Oh, sorry, this is the current. So currently, BV loss regulations in Europe anyway, EASA have predefined risk assessment PDRA G03, which enables this low level altitude flying around power lines and critical infrastructure. So they're favorable environments to obtain BV loss approvals. They're still within C2 link, so the control link, but the advantage of the docking stages is they have the C2 controller on board. So multiple docking stations connected across a network. You can continue that C2 link across with relays across the network. These are in controlled and uncontrolled space. There's a lot of flexibility around the regulations. So I think those that are operating in Europe, this is a really useful PDRA or a predefined risk assessment to apply for your BV loss approvals when it comes to power lines and that sort of low altitude, close range. And again, it's the reason the regulators have done this is your operations are typically really close. So they're close to the asset. They're not too far above it. So in this case, 15 meters. So the airspace risk is reduced significantly because obviously you would implement geofences, or as Peter alluded to there, the systems they have developed on board the docking station to kill the motor in case of any kind of failure, to remove or not remove, you can't really remove risk, but to reduce risk. These systems are in place and the regulatory environment is now at a point where it's sort of accommodating, and it will become more advantageous to apply for these permissions and to receive them on a kind of quicker turnaround. Obviously, it's slow at the moment, but these will become a lot more standard, I think, in time. So if you want to jump forward, Peter, please. And suppose this is how we foresee the future of Powerline inspection. So it's a network of strategically placed docking stations, all connected. And we're working with Peter on this at the trial site, where we have multiple docking stations located on site. And we're deploying the drone from one dock, inspecting towers, moving to the next. The site obviously is a small site, so it's not the size of a power line or between two substations. It's a field-based site, so there's a whole host of technical challenges that we need to overcome to do this at scale. But to do it on a small scale as a proof of concept is really beneficial, and it's of huge interest to utility companies. So the idea of bunny hopping, connecting docks is the next step, I think, for dock stations in general, because a lot of the time dock stations are focused around one location and one particular operational environment and geographic location. Yeah. Having those connected across a network. I know, Peter, you probably want to jump in here and comment as well. So, but that control aspect, being controlled from a remote operational center, is hugely, there's huge potential in this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very familiar kind of question we get asked now. Is okay, we've done the POC, now we want to scale these systems. But the challenges with pipeline security or conveyor belt inspection, or any linear inspection where you want to use a small aircraft, is you don't want it to have to return back to where it took off from, because that requires probably 10, 15, 20% of the battery usage to get back to that docking station. So this bunny hopping solution, where our software can, along with Flightbase, can do a handover, where we can hand over that drone to that docking station and rebind the drone to that system, enables you to bunny hop from dock to dock. And again, with the infrastructure we're building out with yourselves around having a central control room, where you can just have multiple monitors that are monitoring the missions, monitoring the systems, monitoring the data analysis, just makes this vision, if you like, of these linear inspections a reality. And I think this project we're involved with, will soon become the kind of the platform, if you like, or the white paper of how this is done. So we're really excited to get going on the project. Oops, I think I missed a.
It would be the one last slide, I think, Peter, it shows the kind of.
Yeah, apologies.
That one, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so I guess this is the kind of setup we have for this proof of concept. We obviously, the site location is very specific to the utility company. They've provided us with a designated site to do this trial. The remote operation center is our office, so you can see an image of the kind of setup we have with multiple screens, delivering different types of imagery, whether it's from flight base, IDI, or the data itself, or there's different, but the operator sitting remotely currently will have the pilot on site with the dock from a regulatory point of view, but throughout the course of this POC, we will remove that pilot and completely control it remotely. The air risk, as I mentioned, atypical airspace reduces that level of risk for these type of operations, and it's the same for all infrastructure, I should say. So it's not just power lines. This could be applied across multiple types of applications. The ground risk, obviously, controlled sites. So there's a huge host of challenges. That's what we didn't say this, but from an operational point of view, when it comes to docks, there's huge kind of operational challenges people need to consider in advance of operating docks. But in this case, it's a safe environment. The ground risk is reduced. There isn't third parties, or obviously it's all controlled. The drone control is provided through flight base and IDI. Comms is really important. You need a high degree of comms. So 4G, Starlink. We're using the Halo system as well. I think they were on this presentation or conference earlier today. Multiple docking stations. The drones are all compliant with EASA's regulations. So the means of compliance 2511 and 2512, I think. Detection and avoid systems. So we're going to place a radar on the site. And then, I don't know, Peter, if you've alluded to this already, but the UTM integration that IDI have in their system. So having that awareness of surrounding airspace, which is really important to understand, because once you remove yourself from the equation when you're operating docks, as in remove yourself from the site, it's quite an unusual experience to operate docks remotely without that kind of wider airspace environment knowledge and awareness. So I think, Peter, if you want to describe what you guys have done within the UTM integration piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a full integration with Altitude Angel UTM, which is hooked into the dock flight base platform. So when the mission is planned and the execution of the mission starts, it first requests that approval through UTM, through Altitude Angel. We'll get a response back, and we can then authorize that flight, done automatically, authorize that flight to continue. If there then is an incursion, we can then receive a detect and avoid message from Altitude Angel, where the operator will then make a decision based on that information. So they can hover, reduce altitude, return to home, whatever the decision that needs to be made at that location. We are probably quite some time away before that's fully automated. We like to leave that decision making for detect and avoid to the operator, because they'll be live on the dashboard and they can see the risk and be able to mitigate as and when. But not only that, and I think it's a familiar question that comes about with precision landing, and how do we mitigate the precision landing if it fails, or if there's GPS denied areas, or if there is challenges with precision landing. So we're developing 3 layers of precision landing. So we've got the precision landing that's vision-based through flight base. We then have developing sensor fusion. So we will have some sensors on the landing platform and the drone, which can be the second layer of redundancy for landing. And then the third layer is dock cameras. So we'll have various cameras around the docking station that can detect the position of the drone to ensure that it can land safely. So these are all layers of mitigation of risk that we are developing along with Flightbase and other partners to ensure that we can reduce that risk as much as possible.
Right. I think, okay, that was an amazingly informative session. You've covered multiple topics, including flight safety. And I think that is probably why we've got so many interesting questions lined up for you from the audience. So I'd like to start with one of the questions, which says, doesn't inspecting power lines disrupt the RC, GPS, and RTK signal range of the drone? How near should the drone be to the power line?
No, we have operational procedures in place that limit the distance the drone can be. From an operational point of view, it depends on the size of the drone. So we'll keep certain distances prior to. So in our flight mission planning, the setback distance from the drone is already embedded within the flight plan. So the operator then just needs to ensure that the distance, but the interference, from an interference point of view, yes, there's risk to it, but if you keep certain distances that are pre-agreed with the utility company, so they'll have a standard where what they'll decide is as close as they want drones to be, and we comply with that, and then we build the flight plans around that safety distance. So there's always a buffer between where the drone is and the Powerline asset itself. And as I mentioned, the missions are all pre-planned based on LiDAR data. It's really accurate LiDAR data. So we can measure that down to the kind of centimeter in terms of the distance from the Powerline we are. Depending on the size of the Powerline, different 400 kV towers to 220 to 110, they all have different separation distances, obviously, because they're different sizes and powers. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really good question, because part of the project is about reducing that risk with RC signal as well as interference. And as technology improves and as other drone manufacturers develop new systems, there won't be a necessity within docking station to have a remote control, a physical controller. We could have a network of network modules across that linear route. So the drone just hands over to each of them signals. So there's lots of opportunities here, and like Fergus said, there's the distance is one thing, but also the advancements in technology will improve that.
Exactly, and I think you said it well, Peter. That infrastructure, that's what's really good about Powerline operations. It's already in place. It's generally safe and secure from the utility's point of view. In fact, when this project started, the utility company had asked us, could we deploy the docking station on the tower? But obviously, as one of the guests mentioned there, from a safety point of view, technically you could do it, but obviously when you go to land the drone, there's complexities, and maybe in the future, mini docks located on towers, but we're not there. But the utility company kind of asked that question too: could we actually integrate it on the tower? Because for them, then it kind of secures the asset, and it removes it from the ground where maybe it's at risk from third parties. But for now, it's kind of a substation based system, so rather than open fields. But
right, yes, I think that answers the question perfectly. We have another question which says, how many structures are being inspected along that 7,500 kilometers? What is the split between distribution and transmission? And how many dock and drones are usually required for this kind of area?
And good question. I think I need to check my figures on the 7,500 kilometers. I'm not sure the split between distribution. I think there's 12,000 towers and 13,000 towers. I'm not sure which is which, but there's about 25,000 towers in total. And I think the distance between towers it varies depending again on the size of the tower, but 200, 300 meters between them. So yes, right now today in the current kind of operational limitations, that requires a huge number of docks, which from a cost point of view doesn't really make sense. But as the technology develops, drones can fly longer, because I think the C2 link on a Mavic or Mavic 3 Enterprise, which is in the IDI dock at the moment, is it 7-10 kilometers? Peter, you might know better.
Yeah, round about with visual line of sight, yeah.
If that was your limit, but with the relays built into the towers themselves, you can then extend the distance the drone operates. But that's a question that will be answered throughout this kind of proof of concept. We'll get a better understanding of the number of docks required.
It's also the entire docking station infrastructure that you traditionally have, so charging, cooling, and all of the other complexities around a single dock won't necessarily be relevant for this project. There could be 10, 15 docking stations which are just hubs. So it just goes and charges or swaps a battery and off it goes again. It doesn't necessarily need all of that complexity involved in a current system. So it wouldn't be 150 times the docking station that you would traditionally buy or install onto that system. It could be one and then 8 to 10 hubs where it's landing and just bouncing off the network. So there's lots of scope for this, and this project, I guess, is going to, write the kind of the standards that we would have.
And I think from a utility point of view, the advantage of this is that you have sort of that 24/7 oversight of the network. So currently they'll have inspection cycles depending on the utility company. It could be 1 year, it could be 5 years. But obviously the dream scenario would be to have 24/7 eyes over their network, deploy the drone whenever they need it, whether that's for third-party intrusion or whether it's for post-storm damage, which obviously is a huge, in our part of the world, dealing with storms or dealing with the damage done by them after the fact, having drones available to go and do that. They do it manually today, but it's quite cumbersome and complicated. But yeah, to have that sort of oversight 24/7 on-demand service is a huge step forward for their use case.
Right. Yes, I think that answers the question pretty well. So we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to take up one last question. The question is for IDI. It says, what is the operational temperature range for IDIPLOYER station? The user says that I'm from Norway, and recently we saw a demo POC from another dock. However, the issue was that as the snow got deposited over the docking station, it wasn't able to open the enclosure. So is this something that your dock caters to, or you've thought about how to tackle with this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Over the last 5 years, well, 3 years, we've been deploying these systems. We've deployed them in really, really hot climates and really, really cold ones. And we assumed, we assumed these hot countries would be our biggest challenge, but actually cooling the docks is really easy. Managing them in snowfall is really, really challenging. There's two things that you need to do in these locations. One is raise them off the ground. That is fundamentally the answer for our type of docking station. Where you've got the roof opening up system becomes a real challenge because you have all of that weight of the snow on top of the docking station. Where we've got the drawer open platform, we don't have that issue. So raising it off the ground and having a drawer open docking station has been a better solution in these high snowfall environments. We have various heating elements and climate control of our system. So there's 2 redundancies for heating. So we have the normal traditional heater cooler system. If that fails or if that doesn't cool or heat the system up enough, we then have a second heater that will kick in. But it's a really fine balance because the drone's LiPo battery doesn't like to be too hot. So we've got to make sure that we balance that really, really finely. And there isn't a complete answer to that yet. We're still in them proof of concept phases in them environments, but happy to take an individual call with that customer just to kind of assist in any way we can.
Right. I think yes. So if you guys have any other question for Fergus or Peter, you can drop them at their booths. So you can go to the expo section and check the IDI and GeoS airspace booths, and you can talk to them, or maybe if you want, you can connect with them over LinkedIn and ask whatever questions you have. So that's about it from today's session. It was amazing, guys. Good response. All of you great questions. And we also have recently launched the NestGen community. The link has been put in the chat, which you can join. It's like an invite-only community for all the drone nerds and enthusiasts. So you can fill the form and join the wait list. And thank you for this session. And you can carry forward to the next session as well. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.